Hi everyone, welcome to day 16 of our daily blog and to these themes in John's Gospel, and at the moment we're looking at the theme of justice. And today we're going to look at the story of Ruth, particularly chapter 2. And the book of Ruth, which takes her name, is one of the most loved of all the books in the Bible because it tells a very human story of how good overcomes tragedy. But in case you don't know the story, it begins with a lady called Naomi, who has 2 sons, and there's a famine in the land of Israel, and she sets her sights on going south to a place called Moab, which is between Israel and Egypt, and there her 2 sons meet and then marry 2 Moabite women, one of whom is called Ruth. And then a tragedy of all tragedies happens where the 2 sons die, and so mother and the 2 daughter-in-laws are left. And in their culture at that time, there was no social services, there was no support, they would have been seen as outcasts. And Naomi decides to return home back to Israel and encourages the 2 daughter-in-laws to stay with their own people, but Ruth decides she really wants to go with Naomi. And so Naomi and Ruth, they set their sights for going back to Israel and back to Bethlehem. And when they return, Ruth, in chapter 2, starts to think about gathering some food. And she does so by going along behind the harvesters in the harvest field and picking up the little bits that are left over. And there's this wonderful moment where the person who is in charge of all the harvesters, a farmer called Boaz, notices Ruth trying to eke out some sort of grain, some sort of living from what was left over. And he encourages his harvesters to actually deliberately leave extra bits of the harvest for her to pick up. And this is where it speaks into our theme of justice. Is justice simply about what's fair? Is justice simply about making sure that everybody gets their fair share? Or is there something more to God's justice? And here is demonstrated by Boaz an incredible generosity. He sees this person struggling and indeed lifts her up, and notices within her a tremendous loyalty to Naomi. And it's these 2 expressions, generosity and loyalty, generosity by Boaz, loyalty by Ruth to Naomi, that then leads to these 2 wonderful characters discovering that they are in some way related through Naomi. And in that tradition at that time, they would actually have been a bond between them, and they fall in love and eventually they marry. It's a very human story in some ways, but at the same time it's an incredible God story. How can it be a God story? Well, I'm always remembered about a story that some children acted out once in one of our assemblies, and it was about trying to look over a wall. Is it fair that everybody's given the same size box to look over the wall? What if some of the children need more help to be able to see over the wall than others? Would you simply give them the same size box? Or would you actually give them different size boxes so that they could all look over the wall? And perhaps going even further, could you take the wall down? I still remember that story acted out by those children in that assembly. It was so powerful because it speaks beyond justice of equality to actually a generosity of heart. And this story then is played out within the heart of God. In that sense, we are all not worthy, maybe, of God's justice, God's love. But he chooses to pour out that love, just as Boaz did in that field that day, because he wants to lift us up. He wants us to know that we matter. And he encourages us to do the same with others. And that's really perhaps poignant at the moment, with all the discussions about furlough schemes and what follows furlough schemes. Do we simply look for making sure that our money is secure, our livelihoods are secure, Or are we willing to actually share with others so that they too can be lifted up and maybe even the wall taken down? We are looking to a brave new world which is beyond COVID, and seeking to find the values and the principles from God that will help us to build that new world. So the story of Ruth, 3,500 years ago, is incredibly relevant for today. If you ever get time to read it, it's a beautiful story. And the little twist in the tale, at the very end of the book, if you read to chapter 4, there's the genealogy of the children of Boaz and Ruth. And that all leads all the way to King David, and of course from King David to the person of Jesus himself, all in Bethlehem. Have a good rest of the day. God bless. Bye for now.